Hello MindBar community, and welcome back to Module 4, where we are going to be debunking some of the myths about grief that we have been taught culturally for our entire lives that once we become grievers, cause us to feel like we are doing our grief incorrectly. So today we're going to be going over 4 of my least favorite myths that really put grief inside a box. This box is exactly how long grief lasts, what it should look like, and how grievers should behave. And I can say from personal experience that I have met 0 individuals who fit inside that box. So today we're going to be ripping the box apart and deciding that grief is unique and you are allowed to do it in whatever way feels best to you. So we're going to be going over these 4 myths, including grief happening in an orderly fashion. While we talked about the tasks of mourning, we'll touch a little bit on Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief, which is just a more commonly known outlook on the grief process. Then we're going to talk about the myth that talking about our loved ones, crying about them, being upset still means that you're stuck in grief. We will also be talking about how grief is something that we work to get over, which is absolutely not the case. Because as I've said in previous modules, grief is a lifelong transformative process, not a destination. And finally, we're going to be debunking the idea that grief lasts a year, and once that year is over, you are good to go and no longer impacted. So let's start out with grief happening in an orderly fashion. This is really difficult because in America, we love to put things in lists and tasks so that we can check off these tasks when we feel like we're done with them. And then we just never revisit it again. With Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief, people typically feel that they happen in an order that is 1, get it done, after another, get it done, after another, get it done. These include depression, acceptance, guilt, bargaining, and these stages really are an ever-happening, ever-evolving process for grievers. You can feel one at the same time as another. And I always like to describe the 5 stages of grief, if you must subscribe to this theory, as a 5-disc CD changer. I want to just call out all of my millennials who know what I'm referring to. In your car, when you put 5 CDs in there, they all live inside of your car. At any given time, one is going to pop to the top. And so, not to say that when you're done playing that one CD, it disappears. No, it just goes and shuffles back in to the rest of your CDs. So the way I see grief and what we know from many, many grievers who experience is you can go through depression of grief over and over and over as your relationship with your loss, with your loved one who has passed away, and with yourself changes. And so throughout the rest of your life, you're going to be continuing to process potentially through these lenses, but they don't by any means go away, and they do not happen in order. So definitely take the 5 stages of grief idea and being able to check those off your list. So the next one we're going to talk about is one that's really frustrating for individuals in grief, is the idea that if you're talking about your loved one, if you're crying about the fact that they died, if you're really just wanting to tell the story over and over again, that you are stuck in your grief. As we talked about in previous modules, an essential part of processing through the loss, accepting the reality, processing the pain, includes telling your story over and over and over. For people who have not experienced a loss at your level, they might not understand why you need to talk about it over and over and over again. So it's really important to recognize that maybe that's not a safe person to talk about your loss with. In our next module, we're going to be finding ways to identify the right people in your social circles to have these hard conversations with. People that can hold that space for you and be free of judgment when you talk about your loved one who has died. The next myth that I really have a distaste for is this very widespread belief that grief is something you are working to get over. So for somebody to experience a devastating loss, such as that of a child, a spouse, a parent, a friend, the idea for our culture is for them to say, yeah, that happened. It doesn't affect me anymore because it happened about a year ago. Imagine that being true. But our culture really believes it. And so you will hear people say often, it's time to get over it. You need to move on. And those are phrases that are not allowed in any of my circles. We do not by any means get over the losses we suffer. Rather, we learn how to live with those losses, and we integrate the experience of that loss, what we learned, and the depth of the emotion that we've established into the core of who we are moving forward. So while we do not get over losses and we do not move on, we do move forward in life because that's really the only choice that we have. But you will always be impacted by the loss of your loved one. But more importantly, you'll always be impacted by the love that you continue to have for the loved one who has died. That's important to remember. Grief ends a life. It does not end love. The last myth that we're going to talk about that really puts this framework around grief that just doesn't apply is that grief lasts a year. So in a magical world where this is true, you can be very, very sad for a year. And then on the year anniversary, you're done. You feel better and everything's fine. Unfortunately, we just have not seen this true in almost any setting. So I think where this comes from, again, is our culture's need to put timelines and checklists and frameworks around this vast experience that is grief and loss. Unfortunately, the first year of grief has its challenges. It's you learning for the first time how to live without your loved one. You'll experience the first Christmas, the first holiday, the first birthday, the first summer, your first favorite event without them. You will also experience the first anniversary of their death. These are hard things, but it is by no means the end of your journey in grief, because with the second year often comes less support from your social circles. It also involves having to see that this is the second year without your loved one, that I can't believe they haven't been here for 2 years now, that we've already done a Christmas without them and it still doesn't feel right. It is important to remember that every single holiday without your loved one is you continuing to learn how to do it without them and how to sit back in awe and say, wow, they have been gone for 10 years now. It's up to us to keep that knowledge that grief is a process that lasts a lifetime at the forefront of our minds when we start to feel judgment about ourselves. And unfortunately, when we experience judgment from others who just don't understand this experience. In the next module, we're going to be talking about how to enlist your loved ones in supporting you through this process. And within that module, we're also going to be identifying your safe people that you will be able to call upon 10 years down the line when you're feeling grief and you're just needing to talk it through. So come along with me to Module 5.